You're very welcome to the Irish Political Roundup with me, Roisin the Cleric.
And me, Brophy. Roisin, we're delighted to be continuing our discussion on the links both politically and the many others that are out there between the United States and Ireland.
Yes, we do indeed, Paul. We have a very fascinating guest tonight and someone with a lot of experience. And we have Adam DeRito. And Adam DeRito, I've just lost all my notes on the internet and on everything
That's
else. So
fine.
we'll get you to talk to us about who you are. But you have a very interesting, you are a former American United States Air Force veteran. You
hmm
are an intelligence analysis, and you are a podcaster.
Yeah, that's pretty much my background. My normal day job, I work in the energy sector here in the United States. So working a lot in oil and gas and industrial wastewater treatment. That's where I have my master's in. I'm still serving in the United States Army Reserve. I recently was just selected as a captain here in civil affairs, which is a branch of psychological and special operations, which we do civil influencing, working on critical infrastructure in countries that need it. That is my background. I was with the 19th Special Forces Group for 10 years as a parachute rigger, working with Green Berets directly in the National Guard here in Colorado. And yes, previously, how I started my political career, so to speak, was at the United States Air Force Academy, where I was sexually assaulted and retaliated against. I've been fighting for congressional legal reforms here in the United States with the Department of Defense to protect our servicemen and women, which I know is a prevalent problem in multiple militaries around the world. And, that's how I got tied up working with the Trump campaign. For the past year, I've been working on, with congressmen, congresswomen, senators across the United States to pass these legal reforms and ensure that we have the right elected officials here in the United States to change our course of action here after being at war for 20 years as a veteran of those wars overseas.
You're a veteran, but you've also been very much involved in public service all your life, from a firefighter
Yep.
to a veteran to being in the American Air Force, and then the work that you're doing outside. Um, and you have been an advocate, for, as you said, for the Department of Defense for 14 years in Washington, D.C. You are the originator of the DeRito Act. Can you tell
Yes,
us
ma'am.
about that?
Yeah, so like you said, I did start off in my younger years. I was a firefighter, EMT, search and rescue technician in New Jersey, New York. That's how I started my public service career when I was 16 years old. And, eventually that inspired me to join the military right after 9/11. I did lose family in the towers, so I was directly
Oh,
connected to those events in 9/11. I saw the towers fall from my hometown in West Milford, New Jersey, which was a crazy experience being from the East Coast. But like I said, after I was sexually assaulted and retaliated against in the military, I come to find out that there's no law in the U.S. military that prevents officers and senior non-commissioned officers from retaliating against service members by falsifying their mental health records. Because the best way to discredit somebody is to say that they're crazy,
yeah, yeah,
right? So
yeah.
what they did is they tried to come after my character, despite my years of public service prior to that, saying that I was crazy and everything I was saying was a lie. I did not even know they went into my mental health records and falsified them, saying I had several major psychological conditions. And when I found that out, I did file a lawsuit against the United States Air Force Academy. And then it came back in federal court, and federal court said, "We agree with you, Mr. DeRito. Your constitutional rights were violated. However, there is a Supreme Court law that states that no civilian court system that abides by the constitutional products of the United States is obligated to tell the military what to do." So the military is basically the fourth branch of government in the United States and runs on its own rules. And they can disregard the constitutional rights of the service members who raise their right hand and swear to protect the Constitution. So we came up with the DeRito Act, which states that it is illegal for the U.S. military to falsify mental health records to retaliate against service members for reporting misconduct or malfeasance. And it's amazing the amount of pushback we get because we want to be able to hold those people accountable. We don't want you to retire. We don't want you to get removed from the position of command. We want either monetary repercussions or we want you to be sent to jail, sent to prison. Because if you did those things, if a doctor falsified a patient's medical records in the civilian world under HIPAA laws, which is what we call them in the United States, you would go to
Mm.
prison. You would be charged with medical malpractice. And we expect those standards to be applied to the military as well. And that is something that I've been advocating for several years now in Congress.
Wow. we also have, I've got a book here I've interviewed, and in if anybody goes into our videos, Women of Honor, Karina Malloy, who was one of the original Women of Honor who stood up for sexual abuse within the Irish Defence Forces as well. We must actually link you both together. You'll have a lot to talk about.
No, absolutely. I'm a little bit familiar with her case. I would love to connect with her and then link us across the pond, so to speak, and start telling our stories. Because what I've learned over several years of podcasting now and been on several shows in the news is that the only way we can effectuate change in our society is to talk about it to the point where the people and the politicians controlling that narrative lose control of that narrative of misinformation.
Wow. You're fascinating. I'm just like really fascinated with the
Thank you.
work that you've done. And, you know, and you're a podcaster.
Yes, I do. So how I started getting my story out, because it's very complicated. I went on Andy Stump's podcast, Cleared Hot, who is friends with Joe Rogan. So Joe Rogan's the largest podcaster in the world, and I was on Cleared Hot. I think it was episode number 137, and started telling my story. And people were like, there is no way that this is true. You know, people attacked me all over the internet saying there's no way that the Department of Defense and the Air Force would do this to somebody, but they did. And then I found out that it wasn't just me that this happened to. This was dozens of other service members and cadets at the Federal Service Academies, West Point, Annapolis, Air Force, and Coast Guard. And I started taking these stories and bringing them on the Dark Saber podcast, which I started. So I would tell my story part for the first half, leading up to the entire event. And then I would start bringing in these other men and women telling me stories of how they were retaliated against as well. And we started building this groundswell of support. And that's how I got connected with lobbyists in DC who want to actually write a law to do this. So, like I said, the best way to resolve these issues is to talk about it where they can't shut you up. And then I also started another podcast called Tuxes and Tomahawks, that's the cross tomahawks behind me, because in civil affairs in the Army, we go off of Lewis and Clark expeditions, you know, leading into the wilderness to go influence Indian populations and everything else. That's kind of the legacy that we carry. But it's also talking to politicians and young veterans and other people with interesting stories and how they're making a difference and a positive difference in their community, state, and nation. And I think that's the biggest mission I work on now is, do I want to reform sexual assault? Yes. But the only way we can reform sexual assault in any of these cases in the United States is to get elected politicians that want to effectuate those changes. And the problem with most of the politicians in the United States is they're massively corrupt. We have the same people, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Joe Biden, who have been running this country for 30, 40 years. They sent my generation to war for 20 years. My entire life has just been war, deployments, losing friends, and everything else. So why would I want to reelect them? That makes no sense. And I know plenty of amazing men and women who, they don't have to run for president of the United States, but they could be mayors. They can run for county commissioner. They can be involved in their local communities. And my goal is to inspire those young men and women in their 30s and 40s to start running for public office, because one of my biggest points is that citizens of the United States need to be citizens and not residents. If you're a resident, you're just sitting here, you're working here, you're sleeping here, you don't care about what the government's doing, whatever else. But my taxes are going up, right? There's illegal immigrants invading my community. How am I going to stop this? Well, start showing up to those meetings. Start being part of the change. And the best way you can do that is learn how to tailor a suit, learn how to talk in a public setting, and start forcing these politicians to make change, or run for office yourself and you be that change.
Mm-hmm. And Adam, the veterans in the United States, it's a massive community. So do you feel like that there is, if you can harness that skill set that is there, which is massive, it could really have a real positive impact?
I do believe that there are so many amazing men and women that I've served over the last 14 years with in the military that I know are good, moral, and ethical people. But the problem is that they're worn out. They're tired. They have been lied to for over 20 years about what's going on overseas, and the people we were sent to kill and the buildings we were sent to blow up. And they know how corrupt the government is, because we've seen it working on the inside. I saw it when I was overseas too. And I said, well, if you're tired of it and you're sick and tired of it, instead of closing your door and ignoring the world around you, why don't you be part of that change? And that's the motivation it's hard to get, is to motivate these non-corrupt, moral people with integrity to run for office. And I'm just trying to inspire them. Yes, I know you have to take your kids to soccer practice. Yes, I know you have to do the laundry. Yes, I know you have to do the dishes. But you can take a couple hours a month to show up to your local meetings and voice your opinions and start making those changes. And that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And you spoke about the DeRito Act, which is
Mhm.
legislation you're crafting and you're trying. Where is that now in the ecosystem of the
So
legislature?
we
How
we
close do you think you are to it becoming law?
So on average in the United States, it takes 7 years to pass a law, which is insane, right? So I've been working on this for 4 years now, so I'm above the halfway point. We came within 3 hours of the last legislative session before the election season really kicked off in July of getting it passed in the NDAA. And the NDAA in the United States is called the National Defense Authorization Act, and that is the massive funding bill that's used to fund the military and all the bills that are required to be funded under the military. So we came very close, but unfortunately, every time I hit a political cycle, which is every 2 years, so every 2 years is for Congress, every 4 years is for president, every 6 years is for senators here in the United States. It always comes to the well, I'm trying to get elected, and if I'm going against the military, it doesn't make me look good, right? So we're hoping that Donald Trump gets elected here in a couple days, and that gives us another 2 years without having to worry about another election cycle until 2026, where and then hopefully the next 18 to 24 months the DeRito Act will be pushed, will be signed off. And like I said, we have a lot of support in Congress. I've worked with Wesley Hunt, Brian Donalds, Lauren Boebert, Senator Tuberville, and even some of the Democrats across the aisle. And they are very supportive of this, but they just want to make sure that they're not at a political risk of losing an election by forcing the military to comply with federal law.
Yeah, yeah. I suppose it's a big constituency, you
It
know,
is.
that the the military in the United States it's absolutely huge. So
It's a
you know,
military industrial complex for sure that President Eisenhower warned us about in the 50s, and we're seeing that in full force right now, right? And I'm sure you see the effects here in the UK as well, where we have massive illegal migrants migrating out of Africa and out of the Middle East and invading and taking away our cultures and our church and our religious beliefs and what our countries stand for. Right? I've been to England. I've spent plenty of time in London and up north. I did part of my master's degree at Oxford up there, and it's an amazing culture. I love the build. It's like Harry Potter town. That's what I like to refer it to as, right? And I love England, and I would hate to see Westminster Abbey to have a bunch of Muslim minarets standing behind it. Because that's not what your country is. That's not what it was founded upon, right? I'm not against legal immigration. If you want to be a legal immigrant and you want to assimilate to the culture of the country you're moving to, I'm all about it. But I think the UK is experiencing the same thing that we're experiencing in the US, is that we have plenty of legal migrants who want to be Americans. I work with plenty of Mexican Americans in the oil and gas industry. They're amazing people. They're Catholics. They want to support their families. And they're mad because we have illegal immigrants coming in from Syria and Nigeria and Somalia, and they don't care for American culture. They want to destroy our way of life and our culture, and that's not what we're about. And it's so important that we protect the integrity of our countries and our culture and what it stands for. Because why do I want everyone in the world to be the same? Why would I want to go to England if it's the same as the U.S., right? I want to go there because I want to experience everything that England has to offer. Like I said, I could stand a White Tower for hours. I'm a history nerd. I'm fascinated by English culture because it's so much older than ours. Um, but that's the problem, is that it is okay to have a culture and a country and borders that protect that. And it's unacceptable that we have evil people in this world that want to destroy other people's way of life.
mm,
Adam, have you ever been to Ireland?
No, but I am going this summer and I am so excited. So I am Irish. That's where my family's from,
Are
County
you?
Kerry, historically, yes. So ironically, my last name is Italian. There's a lot of weird things that went on with that, but my actual last name is Lynch,
Oh,
all right.
Lynch. Yes. So my grandmother had an affair apparently in the 1950s that no one never knew about, and I am a full-blooded Irishman.
oh,
Basically, and I know, and I know in the United, it's weird because in the United States they say, "Oh, what are you?" Like, well, I'm like 50% Irish and like 20% Italian, and everywhere else in the world, it's like, no, I'm an Englishman, I'm a Frenchman or whatever else it is. Nowhere in the United States you would say, well, I'm an American. It's kind of a weird culture
yeah.
thing. But yeah, I'm full-blooded Irish pretty much, and I'm excited. I get to go to Dublin to see Oasis. I got tickets to the Oasis show in Dublin. I'm
Fair
super
play to you
excited.
there.
So I'm gonna go to
God
Scott.
tried, he couldn't.
I tried. I was 4,000 in the queue at one stage, and then I just said I've had enough.
I don't know how I got through so fast. I got through within 5 minutes. I got up at 1 o'clock in the morning on my phone and somehow I got in. I thought it was a joke. I'm like, wait, did I really just get tickets to see my favorite
Yes.
band of the 90s? I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So guess I better make plans. I'm going to go visit some Scottish, Scotch distilleries out there like Laphroaig and Lagavulin and everything else. And then I'm going to go head over to Dublin and have myself a time for about a week out there. So I'm looking
Yeah.
forward to it.
And do you know what part of Ireland your Irish connection is?
County Kerry. I know they're from
County
the County
Kerry.
Kerry area. Yep. Mhm.
Oh well,
Okay.
we have to try and link you up with people down there.
Well, you have to let me know when I'm out there. If I have some time, I'll swing by and get a rental car. I'll meet up with you guys. Just let me know.
do.
Yeah.
Oh my God, this is even better. We didn't know you had Irish connections. I just thought you were Italian with the name.
No, I am not Italian at all.
No.
And growing up, Adam, would you been kind of like familiar with your Irish background, and would your family have told you stories about Ireland, or
They haven't. So I mean, that's the issue is that it's so old. My family goes back hundreds of years in Ireland, and it's been a massive discovery for me. My uncle has been working on it for years with our genealogy and our tree. But I'm excited to learn more about my family. I'm sure I still have like distant cousins out there somewhere, and we just got to find the rest of them. So.
Well, you're a podcaster. Wouldn't that be cool to actually record everything, looking for your ancestors in County Kerry?
Yeah, no, I'm excited if I could find them. I'd be super excited to do that. So.
So Adam,
Mhm.
you also are a member of the Common Sense Network.
Yes.
Tell us about that. What is that?
So the Common Sense Network is a group of special operations veterans, pararescue, Green Berets. Myself, I work in psychological operations, civil affairs, and we are, like I said, motivating other veterans to run for office and teaching them how to do those things. So that's our biggest thing. There's lots of different podcasters out there, and we just kind of link all our podcasts together and use that as a way of talking to multiple groups of people around the country.
wow, that
You're very
that's
busy,
great.
Adam.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the best way to counter disinformation against the U.S. government is to put out more information than they can. So,
And what skills, Adam, does a veteran have that can be easily transferred to politics?
I mean, honestly, it's just the ability to deal with the bullshit, and excuse my language, but we're really good at waiting around and wasting our time. And in politics and having the endurance to, like I said, it's been 14 years trying to get a bill passed, right? And most Americans are going to give up because they're lazy and they want everything quickly, right? But we can endure it, and we can deal with the BS, and we can deal with the political referendums going around. And like I said, also it's just that we're motivated to protect our families and protect the constitutional rights that we swore to protect. And I think that is something that a lot of American citizens are too lazy to endure, right? We understand what sacrifice is. We understand that it's going to take a lot of personal ambition and access to do these things, right? And we're just not willing to give up. We didn't give up for 20 years, and like I said, it's like from that movie Black Hawk Down. It's not about winning the war. It's not about the battle. It's about the men and women to the left and right of you, and making sure you're protecting your community and your family, and that's what comes first. So.
I love the way you Americans rather, you celebrate your veterans. You celebrate your men and women in the defense forces. I mean, sorry, in your military, and you really do show respect for anyone who is in the military. And it's something that Paul and I have written to our politicians asking for an annual day of appreciation and thank you for your service, because we don't celebrate and maybe a lot of people would say we don't show military the respect that they deserve the way the Americans really do show respect and appreciation for your military.
Oh, it is. And actually, there's another podcast that was on out there in England, the Granite Zero podcast. He is a British Air Force RAF veteran, and him and I talk quite often. And he says the same thing. Is like there's just not the level of appreciation for the military in the UK as there is in the US. And I feel bad for those guys because, like I said, they deployed to the same wars we did. We were just across base from each other. You know what I mean? And it's just I just don't think that. And maybe it's just because of the what happened during World War II and everything after that. I think that has a lot to do with it. You're just kind of worn out from the continental wars, and now Ukraine and Russia are kicking off, and we're trying to repeat history here, which we definitely don't want to do. And it's just unfortunate. And but the one thing I will say about American veteran culture is one thing is that just because you serve in the military does not make you a good person. And I think that's something that 9/11 kind of obscured here in the United States, right? There is a lot of immoral and unethical people I have worked with in the U.S. military. But the problem is, after 9/11, the American people have been sold this bill that if you're an American service member, you can do no wrong. Right? Is that you're put on this pedestal that there's no, you're not corrupt, and everything you say is correct. And we're seeing the fallout of this right now, where we're seeing highly respected generals that I worked with, including like General Mattis and General Kelly, and they now are speaking out against the president of the United States, right? Or Donald Trump, right? And it's like, that is not your position as a military officer. We are supposed to be apolitical. We support, like right now, I support Joe Biden. He's my boss, right? Like as an Army officer, I support whatever Joe Biden tells me what to do, as long as it's within the legal confines of LOAC, Law of Armed Conflict, right? But I've worked for Bush, I've worked for Obama, I've worked for Trump, and I've worked for Biden, right? And I have to remain as apolitical as possible, because I think there's also a discontent with what the U.S. military actually does. If I were to ask you, what do you think the purpose of the military is, even in the U.K. or the U.S., what would your response be?
I would say here in Ireland, it is to defend the nation and protect the citizens.
Right. And I think that's a big misconception in the United States as well. In the United States, I am not obligated to protect American citizens or the United States. That is not our mission. That is actually the mission of the National Guard. The National Guard protects local citizens and states. You cannot use active duty military to protect U.S. citizens unless the President of the United States declares martial law. But it's a very simple answer that most people don't understand. When I raise my right hand, I am sworn to protect the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That includes American citizens that are going against the Constitution, right? And I think that's a big misconception.
That's come up in the news recently, hasn't it?
It has. And it's a very interesting argument, because people are like, oh, you're only going to protect XYZ or these people. No, I'm here to protect the Constitution and the rights that our founding fathers established. I don't care who you are. I don't care what you identify as. You want to identify as a cat or a dinosaur, or you're black, Latino, LGBT, doesn't matter. I don't care who you are. My only mission is to ensure that the constitutional rights of all American citizens are protected, even if that means defending it against American citizens. Like I said, all enemies, foreign and domestic. And just to caveat off of that, I was one of the service members that was deployed to Washington, D.C. for the January 6 riots. I was put on an airplane in the middle of the night. I was flown to Washington, D.C. in a military aircraft, fully armed with ammunition. And we were told, if anyone tries to attack Congress or the White House, we were to shoot them. Right? Yes. Right. And that would, and that would blow most people away. Right now, granted, thank God we didn't have to do that. It was a big nothing burger. That was blown up in the media way more than it was supposed to be. When I actually got on the ground, and I don't know if you ever seen the movie National Treasure with Nicolas Cage, but I was like excited. I was like giving myself a tour. I'm like walking around the halls of Congress with a rifle, with full ammunition, going, wow, look at all these really cool artifacts from my country, walking around to Nancy Pelosi's office and everything else. But that, like I said, our purpose in the U.S. military is to defend the Constitution. It's not American citizens, right? It's the Constitution above all else. And I think that's gotten lost over the last 20 years of war. And that's been convoluted with all these wars we're fighting overseas and all these conflicts we're involved in, because we've lost the moral principle of what our Constitution states and what the purpose of our military actually is.
That's a really good thing, that as citizens, we and citizens of each country, is to understand the purpose of our military and the purpose of our government and match them up. And see, that's a really good, interesting question to even ask politicians, Paul, who are running for election and candidates. What is the position and what is the purpose of a politician and our defence forces?
Yeah, I would have said the exact same as what you said, Roisin. But Adam, that's really
we are
interesting.
a defence force. We're not an army, so maybe that's the difference. But my son, no, I think too. In their oath, they swear to protect the Constitution. If my memory serves me rightly, I think that somebody said that to me.
So nowhere does it says in my oath that I have to protect American citizens.
I think that's been said to me too, but the defense forces must check that one out. And any of our viewers, please do check that out and leave comments in the comment section below. That's a really interesting. I never thought about that.
And this is also the purpose of having a parliament or a representative government, right?
Yeah.
And I'll just speak on my country alone. Not all American citizens know what the hell they're doing. And there's a lot of dumb people in my country that will impulsively cause riots, burn down police stations, and everything else. Do I think I have to protect them? Absolutely not. right? What they're doing is immoral and illegal, right? And this is why, we have, my biggest favorite line that the Democrats are currently using in the United States in this election season is that Donald Trump is a threat to democracy. I hope so, because we don't live in a democracy. We live in a constitutional republic. We elect representatives to represent citizens, right? So, no, we don't want a democracy. Can you imagine if we had a full democracy in this country? It would be mob rule over everything. And that's not what we want. That is why, John Locke and taking, we stole a bunch of stuff from your government to establish our Constitution and our Bill of Rights and our Declaration of Independence, right? But there is a reason why even our founding fathers knew that mob rule and a true democracy is an actual threat to the establishment of the republic. And we need to understand that. Is that I'm not saying that the elected politicians are the smartest people ever either. There's a lot of corruption there as well. But we don't want mob rule in the United States. We don't want mob rule anywhere. We want a representative government and keep the government as small as possible. And that's why I'm hoping Donald Trump gets elected, because he'll reduce the fraud, waste, and abuse we have going on in our government. He'll, bring in government efficiency with Elon Musk, Tulsi Gabbard, and RFK, and get us healthy again. Because that's the problem, is that sometimes the citizens don't know best, and that's just a fact of life.
We'll talk about the American elections with President Donald J. Trump in a little while. But Paul and I were talking. We went down to the JFK Arboretum. It's just, we're in Kilkenny, so it's just about 40 minutes down in another county in Wexford. And we actually seen in the video that the difference between politics and governments, and how governments are run, and the difference between politics between even Ireland and England and the North. It's all different types of politics, government, and even how we vote is different.
Yes.
And up north, I think we just do one, and we just do an X, and then down here we go 1, 2, 3, and if there's 100 people in the election, you go down from 1 to 100. So but we don't understand how American politics work. Can you tell us a bit about how does American politics? What's the difference between the Senate and Congress? And
sure,
yeah.
Yeah, sure, that's easy. So you guys have the House of Commons and the House of Lords, right?
No, we're in Ireland, so we have the Dáil, we have the House of Oireachtas, we have the Dáil and the Seanad.
Okay, so I was just speaking on my familiarity with the UK, which is what, Northern Ireland, England, Scotland, and Wales. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay, right. So I'm just speaking on my familiarity.
I'm from the North, though, originally.
Hey, from what I heard, my ancestors were, in the North too, and had some complications in the 80s. So, whatever that means. It's probably why I joined the military and have a history of military officers and rebellion in my family. Weird how that works. So it's pretty easy. So if I recall correctly, there's 435 members of Congress in the House of Representatives here in the United States. They are elected every 2 years. And that goes on population density, which is also the big problem with illegal immigrants, because illegal immigrants by law right now are included in those population counts. So if you live in a less populated state, like say the state of Wyoming, you're going to get, I don't even know what it is off the top of my head. I think they have like 6 representatives in the House of Representatives, because they have, let's say, 10 million people, right? So those 6 people represent the 10 million. But in California, they have 54 representatives, because they have a population of say like 30 million, right? So the amount of representatives you get in Congress depends on population density, right? And that's a density population representative quorum for the entire United States for every state. Counter to that, the Senate, there are 2 senators for every state, no matter what the population density is. So that's supposed to make sure that the highly populated states, such as New York and California, can't overrule the will of the people of less populated states, such as West Virginia or Wyoming or North Dakota, where there's a lot less people, right? So you get normally the bills, how they're passed in Congress is that the House of Representatives will draft a bill based upon the majority of what the country wants, and then it goes over to the Senate, right? So there's 435 members of Congress, and then there's exactly 100 members in the Senate. And then after Congress passes whatever they want and moves over to the Senate, those 100 senators will decide if that bill is going to move on or not. And if it is passed, then it goes to the President of the United States, where the President of the United States will sign that into law or veto that and send it back to the Senate or the House of Representatives. Or if they can't agree, which goes on a lot in this country in the last 4 years, then it goes to the Supreme Court. So that's how the trifecta works in our country. Is you have Congress, which is the Senate and the House of Representatives. Then you have the President of the United States, which is the executive branch, and then you have the Supreme Court, which is the judicial branch, and that is how the checks and balance system works here in the United States for passing laws.
Right. And one thing that interests me, Adam, we have a presidential election here. Sorry, there's a presidential election happening in America, and every citizen will register a voter will have the opportunity to vote. But what amazes me is person could win the overall national vote, but the the electoral college is totally different. So that's nearly trumps what the vote of the people, which is I find a little bit
Yes.
unusual.
So this is exactly what we talked about, why it's extremely dangerous to have mob rule and popular vote in the United States, right? Because if you did have popular vote in the United States, then California and New York would decide every election in the United States because they have the most people. Well, I don't want New York and California to tell me what to do, ever. I'm a farmer. I live on 12 acres of land, built my own house on a homestead in the middle of nowhere. I do not want New Yorkers telling me how to live my life, ever. Right? So this is why we had the Electoral College and why our founding fathers put it in there. So it's based on population density, just like the House of Representatives is. But there's a certain amount of Electoral College votes that every state gets. So I believe California is like 58. New York is like 47. Colorado is only 9, right? We only have 9 votes for president. So in order to win the presidency of the United States, you need 270 Electoral College votes cumulatively. Now, normally, the way it works is that there's a popular vote in every state, right? So say 51% of the people because Colorado is a very Democratic state, unfortunately. Say there's 51% who vote for Kamala Harris, 49% vote for Donald Trump. Normally, the way the Electoral College works is that all 9 votes will go to the popular vote candidate, right? So those 9 Electoral College votes will go to Kamala Harris because the majority of the people wanted Kamala Harris, right? And that goes state by state, right? So in California, it always goes by the popular vote. That's who's going to get the Electoral College votes. Now, there are some states legally trying to fight this now where there could be a split vote. So say, let's just go back to using Colorado as an example. If 51% wanted Kamala Harris, but 49% wanted Donald Trump, then that would mean 5 Electoral College votes in the state of Colorado go to Kamala Harris, and 4 Electoral College votes would go for President Trump, right? So that would represent the population better. Now, obviously, the Harris administration has been fighting this in court to ensure that that doesn't happen, but we'll see what happens. But there are some states that can split the votes. It just goes state by state and how they want to divvy out their Electoral College votes. But the Electoral College is basically built the way the Senate is to ensure that mob rule and the popular vote does not dictate that heavy, densely populated states overrule the majority of rural states here in the United States.
Okay, that's an education for me there. It was interesting because I remember looking at a thing. I think it was in 1992. Ross Perot ran as a third party candidate. He got 20 million votes, which was incredible. But like he hadn't really a hope of actually winning the presidency because of it's two party state and electoral college.
Right, and he couldn't, and legally, the way the laws were written back then, he couldn't win enough Electoral College votes. Right. That's just, and it is established that way for a reason, right? We don't want, and I'm actually for additional parties in the United States. I think the 2-party system is broken. Is that ever going to change in my lifetime? Probably not. But unfortunately, you also don't want extremely wealthy people. Let's just say Elon Musk, richest man in the world, runs for president of the United States and buys out all the votes in the United States for the Electoral College and does whatever he wants. We also don't want that. We don't want extremely wealthy, influential people to be able to run in positions of government without any checks and balances outside of the Electoral College system, and that's why that system exists for that reason.
Right.
This is really interesting.
Mm.
I'm excited to talk about this stuff. This is kind of fun for me. So,
and it really gives us Irish people an understanding of how the American politics work. And I think it's really important.
No, and it sounds complicated, but like I said, I've worked in politics now for 14 years and I've broken it down. And yes, is it about influence and friends? Absolutely. Do you think I was going to go to Donald Trump's house 3 times this year if I didn't know somebody? Absolutely not. Right. But here's the thing. I'm a nobody. Right. I'm an army officer. I'm a farmer. I'm a paratrooper, and I'm an oil and gas guy. Right. But what I did was I just started showing up to meetings and I started meeting people. I started meeting my state representatives. I started meeting my congressional representatives. And soon enough, when you start building those relationships, you start getting invites. Like, hey, if you care enough about the system to be involved, then maybe you should be involved. That's why any citizen, that's why it's not just me. Anyone can do this, but you have to put in the work. You have to put in the flights and rent the hotels and show up, right? You have to have a seat at the table. If you don't have a seat at the table, then yeah, you can sit around and bitch and complain on Facebook and Instagram all you want, but you're not going to effectuate actual change in your government.
Yeah.
That's so true.
And Adam, in the Common Sense network that you're involved in, how many veterans have you been able to assist to get elected to, positions in local government?
Well, we're gonna find out on November 5th, right? So,
Okay.
so we've motivated because we just started this in the last 18 months, right? So it's pretty new. We've been only doing it for a short period of time, but we're hoping that we can at least get 5 or 6 even local guys in, even as mayors, even as middle of town, nowhere representatives, because that's the objective, is just get your foot in the door. Once you can get your foot in the door, you can start working your way up the ladder, because there is a progression, right? You can't just, unless you're Lauren Boebert, you can't just go run for Congress without having any little bit previous experience in your local community and stuff. So we're hoping that we can start with at least 5 to 10 this year. And then after that, just start exponentially building on top of that over the next couple of years going into the 2026 election and showing people that process, because it seems really complicated, but in reality, it's not complicated. It's not hard. You just have to show up and start talking.
And what way would those candidates, are they a mixture of Democrats and Republicans? Are they mostly Republicans? Are they independents? Are they, or
Well, I'm going to be 100% biased because obviously the way my country has been going in the last 4 years, I don't agree with a single Democratic liberal policy in this country, especially with the transgender issue and hormones for kids. I just don't support it. So and obviously I'm a Catholic, so I have some moral and ethical standards I have to abide by in terms of abortion and things like that. So as of right now, even though I have talked to Democrats, we've had, when it comes to energy policy or maybe local agriculture or water rights, those are discussions I'm willing to have with the liberal side of the House. But for the most part, I am supporting candidates that support my way of life, my job, my military. So we've been supporting strictly Republican candidates in this election cycle.
Okay.
Yeah, we've had a big debate over here in Ireland with the transgender ideology and the sex education with schools. So that is really, really on top of the Irish. And
Yes.
with free speech and the hate speech bill and
Oh, that's
assisted
insane.
dying.
I saw that. I was like, what is going on in Ireland right now?
Yeah, that was pushed and rushed through the Leinster House, the Senate, and then the Dáil. So that's going to be interesting because, Paul, we have to wait until the next Dáil, don't we, to see how they progress with that.
Yeah, exactly. I think the hate speech legislation, they passed a certain part, but the parts around, is it defamation and all that, have been kind of put on,
And they
kind of been put on hold.
they don't have a definition of hate. How can you have a hate speech bill when you don't have a definition of what hate is?
Well, and that's insane. And that's just acquiescing to the illegal immigrant population because they don't agree with Irish culture and your religious beliefs as Catholics for the most part, or Protestants, right? Like let's just say Christian. But it's just, why in God's name would I allow these people to come in and destroy my entire way of life? It makes no sense. And now you're saying anything's hate speech. Like, the biggest joke in the United States that was going on when this was happening was the UK and parts of your government in Ireland were threatening to arrest Americans for posting things on Twitter and Facebook. And we said, hey, we have guns over here. You don't. Good luck. So I thought that was really, but it's true. And it's actually extremely dangerous, right? Is because if you are threatening your constituents and your population of speaking out and talking about these things, whether it's disinformation or not, I don't care. I'm a huge proponent of free speech. You know, back here in the 50s and 60s, the American Civil Liberties Union supported Nazi rallies because they wanted to ensure that even Nazi people had the freedom of speech to speak what they wanted to, even if I don't agree with it. Like, I don't agree with anything that they say, but you have the right as an American of your free speech rights, and they should not be infringed on. And that's what's happening in the United States. That's what's happening across the pond right now, is that we are experiencing dictatorial control over free speech in order to push narratives that most of the population doesn't agree with. And it's destroying our basic human rights in common law. And we can't allow that to happen.
Well,
And
you could be visiting me in jail, because I am not going to ever. You could be visiting me, because I'll be saying there's no man is a woman, and there's only two sexes. So that will come under the hate speech bill. Me even saying that, I could be arrested.
Right. And that's insane. Right. I mean, basically, if I was doing stuff I could do on my pod, I get censored all the time on Instagram. If you probably saw it when you added me as a friend, but the government and all the liberals in this country, even though I'm speaking out against the massive voter fraud that's actually going on in the state of Colorado right now, I've been posting about that for the past couple of days. But the Dominion voting machines have been compromised here in the state of Colorado. The top secret passwords to access those voting machines were leaked by the Secretary of State of Colorado, and now none of the votes can be valid in the state of Colorado. And this is a couple days out from a presidential election. And this is what's going to turn to what you're going to see. It's going to be mass chaos on November 5th, because this isn't just happening in the state of Colorado. It's happening in other states as well. We're seeing legitimate cheating happening, which is what happened in 2020. And everyone called Donald Trump crazy. And I was skeptical of it at first. I was like, calm down with the rhetoric. Like, you lost, get over it. But now we're actually seeing that these voting machines are connected to the internet with Wi-Fi cards. Why? Why are they connected to the internet? Right? And we know how Russia and Iran works. They can hack our computer systems pretty damn easily. I'm an intelligence analyst. I will tell you that I can get into your cell phone if I really, really wanted to with a government FOIA request, with a warrant, right? But I mean, you're seeing that the only way to secure our elections here in the United States is voter ID, voting in person, or with a secured mail-in ballot, absentee ballots for members of the military, the sick, the elderly, things like that. But there is no way that non-American citizens should be voting as an illegal immigrant in the United States for president of the United States. And we're seeing our voting machines are being compromised, right? So if our voting machines are compromised, how in the hell is any American citizen going to trust our electoral system moving forward? And this is actually the biggest concern, I would say, from the military intelligence side of it, is that there is a high risk of civil unrest within the next 1 or 2 weeks of the United States, because I do not believe that many American citizens are going to trust the voting system in the United States after what's being exposed here in the past couple of days. And it's going to probably cause a runoff election. I'm assuming that there's going to be massive lawsuits in court about these voting machines and things moving forward. But the solution is so simple. I mean, I was just in Peru for a month doing a humanitarian mission. In order to be a citizen and keep your citizenship card every year, you have to scan your ID, vote in the election in person. Everyone has the day off for election day. It's a national holiday, and that's how it should be in the United States as well. We should make it a national holiday. It's a paid off day for work, and then you should be able to present your national ID, your driver's license, your passport, whatever else it is, and vote in the election, because it is disgusting the amount of voter fraud I have seen here in the United States just in the last week. So
we have voting ID, and we also have a paper vote. So we go in and we do it on paper and the pen, and then we have to show our ID before we go.
And that's the way it should be. That's the way it should be.
Wow. Adam, so before we talk on about we'll go straight into the election, because I'm interested, because we've also gone in with Paul and I. We've also talked a lot about farming and safe food and buying local produce from local farmers. And America is that also, especially with Bobby Kennedy now in the Trump camp, and Make America Healthy Again. That is so important, isn't it? You're a farmer. Do you farm, or what do you farm?
I do. I do hobby farming. I do a lot of self-sustainability. So I grow a lot of my own food. I have bees. I make my own honey. I have chickens. I
Wow.
have my own eggs. I harvest my own birds every year. And yeah, I have my own water source too, because I don't trust the government cleaning my water either with all the fluoride. So, I mean, that is a big difference I've noticed about European food versus the US. And I've spent some time in Europe. Your food is so much better. It just
Really?
tastes, oh, yes, it tastes better. The bread's better. We don't have all these additives. It's illegal to put all those things in food in Europe. In the United States, we're poisoning our population with additives and things that are being controlled by the pharmaceutical companies and big pharma and big ag, right? And I cannot be more excited for Robert F. Kennedy to get into the Department of Health and these things to start actually making us the European standard for food safety, right? Is because Americans are so fat and they're so obese and they're so unhealthy and they sit around waving their American flag and their Levi jeans, saying we're the best country in the world when they couldn't run a half a mile down the street if they tried, right? And it's just ridiculous, right? So I am all about food safety and regenerative agriculture and being more self-sustainable and local farmers markets, because that's kind of the community I live in out here in rural Colorado. And it's such a better way of living. It's so much healthier for your kids because we are poisoning our population here in the United
Mhm.
States, in these food deserts in the city by just not giving access to healthy, nutritious food and just forcing processed food on so many Americans, especially in the
Mhm.
low income sector.
We have that problem too with processed foods here in Ireland. And would you believe we are exporting 99% of our homegrown vegetables abroad and only
Hmm.
consuming 1%? And we are importing the cheap food uh, that they say for one is the climate change. And but
Yeah,
I said, but how can we have to export? And I go, but surely importing food is actually causing more climate change than what we are growing our own. So we have issues like that with
absolutely.
food.
And that's actually something I saw when I was traveling around in the Caribbean. I was visiting a lot of the islands out there, St. Lucia, Barbados, a lot of those countries out there. And the interesting thing is this, is that, back in the day, they were giant slave islands that grew a lot of sugar cane.
Mm.
So they do have agricultural land out there. But ever since the slave trade went away, they are completely 100% reliant on their food being imported by ship every day. And if
Really?
those ships do not show up, these people will starve. And that's why you're seeing mass civil unrest in Haiti, where they're eating each other. I mean, there's literally cannibalism going on in Haiti because the ships can't dock because they're going to get attacked by militia groups, right? So one of the big initiatives I saw even when I was in Barbados is especially COVID. COVID showed them this. When COVID happened, the boats stopped showing up to these islands. Well, what are you going to do? Right? What would happen if all your imports in Ireland stopped showing up and all your agriculture was being shipped out of your country, and now you
Yeah.
have no food? I mean, I know you had the Irish potato famine. That's why my family ended up over here, right? But if you do not have the ability to grow and self-sustain your own
Yeah.
culture, then you are going to die, cause civil unrest, and cause massive problems with the food supply. And you're right. The fact that people try to make the argument that regenerative, self-sustaining agriculture is contributing to climate change is absolute insanity. You don't know how to do math, and you're not an engineer, obviously. You're not assessing these problems correctly. But I believe that not just Americans, but people around the world, especially in Western societies, need to go back to being supportive communities within themselves. Like you go to Italy, Italy's still kind of like that. You can kind of go to your mom and pop stores and everyone's making pasta, and grandma still has the pasta sauce recipe from like the 1910s, right? That's the way it should be, right? Is wholesome, healthy food being grown locally. And being used to support your population, because I think what we saw during the pandemic, and what we've seen over the history of these types of things, is that it is extremely dangerous to have one to two sources of food
Yeah.
when things go bad, right?
I mean, now then they started blaming the war in Ukraine. We couldn't get food, wheat or anything coming over, and bread, and because of the war, and the food prices all went up because of wars. And we here in Ireland, we have a fishing crisis as well.
Yes,
We
you
can
do.
only uh, we only have 15% of our own fishing quotas in our own waters. I mean,
I know.
it's crazy. And that is put into the food supply and the food shortage.
Yeah, and this is actually what I saw. I was in Peru last month doing a humanitarian mission down there. I was in Nepal the year before that, and guess who's taking? Because obviously Peru is a coastal country, and 80% of their food comes from fishing, right?
Yeah.
Well, guess who came in there and started taking all their fish? The Chinese, right? So the Chinese are going there saying, hey, we're going to build your roads and bridges, and then we're going to unilaterally destroy your entire ecosystem out in the ocean because we need all that sushi and all this food back to there. And this is something I will tell people about Ukraine, and I can talk about this openly on the unclassified side, is the war in Ukraine has absolutely nothing to do with the freedom of the people of Ukraine and Russia. The reason why Russia invaded Ukraine is, one, we had a weak U.S. president that they knew he wasn't going to do anything about it. But 80% of the Middle Eastern food supply comes from Ukraine. All they do is they eat bread and rice down there, right? Whoever controls Ukraine controls the influence of the people in the Middle East. That's it. So when Russia knew we had a weak U.S. president that wasn't going to do anything, the United States has been in control of the Middle East and all the oil exports through the Suez Canal and the Strait of Hormuz for the last, 35 years since Gulf War I, pretty much. And we've controlled that. And in exchange in the past, which is, I believe, bad public foreign policy, is that we trade weapons for influence in bases. Well, that's not what people need. The local person does not need a tank or an Apache helicopter. They need food, they need clean water, and they need access to electricity. And when I was over there, I saw the Russians and the Chinese were spending billions of dollars building roads, bridges, oil refineries, electricity generation plants, and the United States was too busy selling them rockets. Well, now we're starting to see the alliances switch in the Middle East to Russia and China because they need food. You can't grow food in the Middle East. In Kuwait, there's not even a source of water. They need to use desalination and water bottles. So Russia took this as a prime opportunity. We're not only building your roads and your bridges and your electricity plants, but now we're controlling your food supply through Syria, through the port of Tartus, right? So if you follow the Bosphorus Straits out of Turkey from the Black Sea, now Russia controls that access point. Turkey's not a very good NATO ally anyway, so they work hand in hand with the Russians. They get a payoff. And then the Russians take all that food from Ukraine that they're stealing, and then they put it to the port of Tartus in Syria, which is why the war in Syria has been going on, because they control areas of influence there with the Russians and the U.S. And then from Tartus in Syria, Bashir Assad is now allowing food to be exported from Syria into Iraq and Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and the UAE. So if I'm MBS, if I'm the leader of Saudi Arabia, and I know all the food's going to come from Syria from a Russian-controlled port, do I care how many helicopters the United States is selling me? No. So I'm going to start working with the Russians because I need to feed my population. Because if I do not feed my population, there's going to be a civil war, which is what's going on in Syria right now with the civil war, right? So Ukraine has absolutely nothing to do with the freedom and whatever of Ukraine. It's not, unfortunately. And that's a lie that's been told by the Western media. The Russians know that if they can gain control, at least of part of Ukraine and those southern warm water ports where they can put their subs and their Russian Navy, that they can now counter U.S. and Western European influence in the Middle East and control the oil trade, which is trillions of dollars a year. And that's what it comes down to. It's that simple.
So it's really a lot bigger than what we're thinking about.
Correct.
It's the food. Who's controlling the food sources?
The Russians are controlling all the food sources right now out of Ukraine.
Really?
All of them. Yeah, I mean the Ukrainians get a few ships off here and there because that's kind of like an agreement we made because you guys need your bread too. But for the most part, they don't care about Ireland. You don't have as much oil as the Middle East does. No. And what runs the world? Clean water, oil, energy, electricity. That's it. And food. That's it. That's how you control populations: food, water, and electricity. That's it.
Yeah, that's true. We all have to eat.
Wow, I tell you, that's really amazing. That an analogy of exactly what's happening there and the wars, and when you think how connected they all are, and yeah, I'm thinking
right. And Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, was in control of Burisma Oil and Gas, and was controlling the oil exports out of Ukraine. Right. So like I said, this comes back to food, water, and energy. Look, if the United States actually cared about the freedoms and democracies of other people in the world, why didn't we go into Rwanda in 1995 to stop the genocide?
Yeah.
We didn't. You know why? Because Rwanda doesn't provide us anything. And that's a horrible thing to say, but that's just the truth and the reality of the situation. The United States uses its military to exterminate foreign policy in a way that will benefit its allies and to stabilize food, water, and energy supplies within its partners in order to build those trade relationships. And if you don't provide us any of those things, then we don't care. And that's unfortunate. But that's just the reality of how the U.S. military foreign policy under this administration currently works.
And how would President Trump and the Trump administration, how would they change things of what's happening?
So this is, I mean, I can't speak for President Trump. I don't know him personally, so to speak, but it's very simple. And this is probably an opinion that's going to piss off a lot of people in Europe when I say this, right? But look, I know a lot of Russians. I'm from New Jersey, right? And you know what? If I look across the world at who is most like the U.S. in terms of, do you have a Christian religion? Do you have a central government? Are you a bunch of, military people that are motivated to support your culture? It's the Russians. The Russians, ironically, are a lot like the United States. They just want to be left alone. They like their culture. They don't want nuclear missiles parked on their border, just like we would never allow nuclear missiles to be parked in Canada or Mexico, just like the Cuban Missile Crisis in the late 90s, in the early 90s, right? Or during the Cold War, right? So I believe the best way forward for this is we have to understand Ukraine is not getting all of their stuff back. That's just the reality of it. It's unfortunate. But I believe the Donetsk and Luhansk region on the eastern side, which are mostly ethnic Russians anyway, they want to go back to Russia, just like Crimea was acquiesced in 2014. So there's going to have to be some kind of deal where the Russians reestablish a border and a line. And I believe they're going to get some of that land back to Russia so they can have more of their port access down in the Black Sea and the Mediterranean area. That's unfortunately just a reality of it to stop the killing. Millions of people are dead overseas. It's not worth it anymore. Unfortunately, Zelensky is highly corrupt, has been embezzling money from the U.S. With the weapons trafficking and them buying land here in the United States in multi-million-dollar homes while his country is being completely destroyed, right? So I believe that President Trump is going to come in and make an ultimatum with Russia in some aspect because his best way of dealing with things is through business deals. Well, what does Russia need? What does Russia want? Well, Russia also needs the ability to export and import energy, export their food. They're the largest country in the world. So how best to do that? Build a trade alliance with Russia. It's Machiavellian in a way that the enemy of the enemy is my friend, right? Because Russia also supplies all your natural gas out there in Europe, right? And they're controlling it and there's nothing you can do about it. You need that energy. You can't live on unicorn shells and solar panels and wind farms because I saw how much of a disaster that was in Scotland several years ago, right? So the best way to defeat Russia in this Ukrainian war is to actually ally with them in trade agreements under the condition of that they break the Sino-China alliance. So China, India, and Iran and North Korea are actual legitimate problems. They want to destroy the United States and everything it stands for. The Russians don't. The Russians don't want to invade the United States and take over our country, but the Chinese do. So does North Korea. North Korea wants to nuke Hawaii on a weekly basis, and Iran wants to kill everyone who's not a Muslim. That's not how Russia believes. So I believe the best way forward for foreign U.S. policy is to actually work with the Russians to create a trade agreement of, hey, we don't agree on everything, but if you don't touch our stuff, we won't touch your stuff. We won't part nuclear missiles out there in Turkey, right? And in order to defer China, Iran, and India in order from taking over Taiwan, which controls all the chip manufacturing in the world pretty much at this rate, 95%. So I believe that's what would happen under the Trump administration is some kind of working business deal with Russia is that the war in Ukraine stops under the condition of you get a little bit of land here and we open up free trade and we reduce and promise that Ukraine will never enter NATO in order to preserve peace in Eastern Europe and that side. And in order to actually break the influence of Iran, North Korea, and China, which are actual significant trade and military issues, along with India, right? Because India is the largest country in the world right now, right? And they also have nuclear weapons. And the worst thing you can do is to allow Russia to combine with India, two nuclear superpowers, in order to create the BRICS monetary system, in order to effectuately eliminate the US dollar from the petro trading in the Middle East. That's not what we want. That would cause a global financial collapse. So,
yeah. Paul, you're listening intently. I'm very conscious I'm doing all the talking.
I know you're going
And
here.
I'm conscious that you have a lot of questions.
No, I just think that it's fascinating. It's a totally different um, perspective that you've given us, Adam. So I'm just, just really
Paul is frozen.
and I know that's a lot.
impressed. That's all. It's very, very, very. Oh,
And like I said, I know that's a lot, but I think these are the conversations that need to be had. What is the truth of what is actually going on? What are the portions at play? And what are the integrated levels of civil influence? Because that's my expertise is civil affairs and why these wars are occurring, what we can do to stop them, what we can do to create world peace, right? And we can do that by working with people who have similar values to us. Like I said, the Russians are mostly Christian Orthodox, right? They have a military, they're super advanced, they have nuclear weapons. So why wouldn't we want to work with them? Yeah, it's like we're never going to get along with Texas here in the US. Texas is like basically its own country out here, but they got a lot of food, a lot of oil and gas, and they're a bunch of yahoos, right? But if we can agree to work together and agree to disagree, it is better to ally and work with the Russians and to create world peace, because you are never going to get that with the Chinese or the North Koreans or the Iranians. It's never going to happen. The Russians don't want to destroy American culture. They just want to eliminate American influence and dangers to what they believe as an influence against their border, which is true, right? Just like I said, we're not going to allow nuclear missiles to be parked in Mexico and Canada. They would never allow that over there either. That's just a common sense perspective from Putin's perspective, right? But the real danger is nuclear war with North Korea, Iran, and China invading Taiwan. And we need to do everything we can to prevent that. And if we can stop that by befriending Russia in a very safe friendship, so to speak, that is a much better way of creating peace in Ukraine and in Western societies than it is anywhere else.
Wow. That's all I can say. It's really, I've really been thinking and taking it in, and I'm drawing a picture in my head, like a little video. I'm very visual of exactly what you've just said. And even down to the port of from Russia, the port in the Black
the Port of
Sea.
Tartus.
And that was one of the reasons to the north here in Ireland, the 6 counties was not why the British kept the 6 counties. Because of the ports in Belfast and Derry and Lissahallie, where I'm from in Derry, was the ports. And ports are so important.
Yeah. And keep in mind, Russia is not innocent. I'm not saying the Russians are the good guys. They've done a lot of horrible things and committed mass genocides and murdering hundreds of thousands of civilians, right? But the U.S. isn't exactly innocent in these things either, right? We wiped out all the Indian populations in the Western United States, and now it's ours. Sorry, you lost. And I'm not saying that's ethically correct, and I know that's a 150-year difference comparison, but in reality, this is what war is, right? Humans are always going to be in conflict. That is the nature of humans, right? And it is unfortunate, but we can't change what has already passed. I can't bring back those millions of lives that have been lost in Ukraine, but what we can do is we can stop it now. And the best way to stop it is to work with the Russians in a bilateral trade agreement that ensures that we break the alliances with China, Iran, and North Korea, which are actual nuclear superpowers, which will actually want to destroy Western European culture.
And when you think about it too, Ireland, there's no one innocent here in Ireland. We've had the Troubles, we've had the civil wars, we've had everything here. And so, like, nobody wants war. And war is very lucrative to some people as well.
Especially here.
It definitely is lucrative. And so you have the American elections next week. We have ours at the end of the month. So we're keeping a very close eye on the elections. And I watched Madison Square, Madison Gardens event with the MAGA event on at the weekend, which is Sunday, wasn't it? Sunday.
Yeah.
Sunday. And I was texting Paul and I go, Paul, could you picture? We have, like, in Ireland, we have Croke Park in Dublin, which would be like the GAA park, and very famous park, where all the Gaelic football and hurling games.
That's where Oasis is playing.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. And then we have the Aviva, where all the rugby and football is. And I said to Paul, you would never ever imagine in a million years that those 2 parks or stadiums would be filled and to full capacity, and then, as you said, 30,000 out the back, outside for a political leader in Ireland. But Madison Square, I watched it, and I was like, "Oh my God!" That's all I.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Thinking, and you were
crazy.
there.
Yeah, I was there. I was right there. It was an incredible experience. To see the unity. Never mind in a liberal area like New York City. Like I said, New York's a very liberal area, and I think even a lot of Democrats, they've had enough with it. A lot of the old school Democrats, like my mom's side of the family is very liberal, but they're like old school Democrats, like the Kennedy Democrat type of people, right? And they've had enough of it. Food prices are extremely high. We're seeing our culture and our religion destroyed. We're seeing kids' lives being taken away through hormone replacement therapy. And I think a lot of people in the United States have just had enough with it. And I think there's a lot, like even Tulsi Gabbard and RFK came over to the Republican Party. And I know Tulsi Gabbard personally because she was my battalion commander in civil affairs in the Army, right? Yeah, so I know Tulsi personally. She's an amazing woman. She's an amazing leader. And those are the types of people I want leading this country. Right. I think we've had enough with the corrupt politicians and the career politicians. I want real Americans who want to help everyone else. And, there's nothing like when Lee Greenwood sings his song, God bless the USA, and Trump's walking in there and you can't even hear in the Madison Square Garden because of how loud it was when he came out. And that's just one of the rallies I've been to. I've been to the one in Colorado. I've been down to Mar-a-Lago. I've been to a whole bunch of other places, but I think just even the people in New York have had enough with it. And I'm hoping that President Trump gets rightfully elected without a bunch of chaos. But like I said, I believe that there's going to be some type of runoff. There's going to be a lot of lawsuits, and I believe this is not going to be decided for even a couple weeks until after the election because of all the voter fraud we're seeing with the machines. So,
And I think too, people have had enough of war. People have had enough of corruption from top level right all the way down, filtering down to even small local level of corruption in everything. Corruption in government, local government, corruption in education, corruption in business. We want an end of corruption.
yes, we do. And I think COVID exposed the corruptness of the government and the amount of control they want to put on the population, the censoring of speech, which you've seen in your own country.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are just waking up and they've had enough of it. And I can't encourage people enough to get out there and vote, whether it's in the U.S. or whether it's in Ireland. Your vote matters. And it's kind of like Trump's latest catchphrase is we got to make it too big to rig, right? There needs to be so many people voting and so many people involved in their local processes that we can't allow illegal immigrants and broken voting machines to determine the future of our country because only 5 to 10% of us decided that it was a good idea to vote. We need every citizen to vote and make sure our voices are heard and that we are protected by the government that swears to protect us through our constitutional rights.
And make America great again.
I hope so. I'm kind of sick and tired of this crap.
Make America healthy again.
Yes, please do.
And I thought whoever came up with Trump's PR with the garbage truck was
yeah, La Savita is a genius. So La Savita is his campaign manager, and it's just like, man, when it almost makes me think that like Biden's doing this intentionally because he hates Kamala Harris for ousting him out of the presidential election. Because at this point, like, that Trump is going to capitalize on that, right? Like, you knew the second you called people garbage that he was going to jump in a garbage truck. You know what I mean? Like, the second Kamala Harris lied about working at McDonald's, you knew he was going to start frying fries at a McDonald's. Like, the guy, when it comes to political strategy and civil influence, like, Trump is a mastermind. Like, he's basically, yeah, he's a genius when it comes to those things. And it's just hilarious because Kamala Harris can't do anything about it. And I think one thing that this election is going to be known for is the podcasting election. One thing I think Trump has really taken advantage of is non-traditional media, just like we're doing, like podcasting, right? When Trump decided to go on all of these massively influenced podcasts outside of the major news stream, so many more people came to his side because he was allowed to have those long form, important conversations. And him going on Joe Rogan was absolutely brilliant. His interview for 3 hours straight was great. Yesterday, JD Vance, his vice president, also went on Joe Rogan for 3 hours. And I think every politician running for a major office should be required to go on shows like Joe Rogan because we don't get to see that on these 30-second news media clips on CNBC or NBC or ABC or CNN, right? I want to know who this person is. I want to know that they are a grandfather, a father, supports their, constituents and everything else. And those long form discussions, I think, are going to help change a lot of opinions of Americans who listen to those podcasts to get to know their politicians so they're not being tricked and lied to like the Democrats have been doing for several years now.
And, that's what the Irish Political Roundup, we like to talk about things that no one else is talking about. And we also like to give platforms to people who would not normally have a platform on mainstream media.
Absolutely.
Mainstream media here in Ireland has definitely been censored and it's a very click. And Paul, you're still with the local radio. I left the local radio in 2022.
There's a lot of self-censoring going on in the media, which is Just crazy. I remember talking to the local journalist here a while back, and it's one of the reasons he's kind of stepped back from it too, is a lot of censorship.
And that's why these podcasts, like the discussions we're having now, are so important. Because how many people are going to know about the discussion between Syria, Ukraine, and the tide of the Middle East?
Yeah.
Right? No one's going to know that unless you start talking to people like me who actually work in that field and understand it, right? No one's going to know who
Exactly.
Donald Trump is outside of his 5-second Instagram posts, other than sitting down and talking with Joe Rogan, right? And that's why these non-traditional media sources like podcasting on Instagram and everything else are so important to the preservation of our constitutional republics in Western European culture. So,
Well, that's as long as we don't get all taken off YouTube. That's the main thing.
gotcha. I get banned all the time and censored like I'm a misinformation spreader, and I'm like, I'm the most accurate person that I know.
It's terrible to how the media have self-censored, have put an awful lot, as President Donald Trump has said, fake news,
Mhm.
and where people are believing everything that they hear, and there's no. I'm from the north of Ireland, right? When I was growing up in Derry, you know, where there was Catholics and Protestants, and then we had media. We had the Catholic media and we had the Protestant media. We all read. Catholics read the Protestant media, and the Protestants read the Catholic media. Unionists, loyalists, and nationalists and Republicans, and we all listened to what other person's point of view was. Now there's none of that. There's no critical thinking. There's no
Yep.
listening to other people's opinions or perspectives or lived experiences.
And how can we possibly make ethical and moral decisions, never mind on a government scale, if we aren't willing to have these open, honest, transparent conversations? It's not possible. And that's what we need to change, and that's what we need to stick by.
Yeah, basically we've been living in an echo chamber for the last number of years, so that can sure if you keep listening to the one point of view all the time, you know, how are you going to learn anything?
Well, it's exactly like the movie V for Vendetta, right? It's exactly what happens in that movie too, is that you have one controlling media source that tells the people what they need to know. And if you do anything outside of that, the government makes you disappear. And even though that's just a movie, we're seeing that happen in real time. I mean, we even had a woman here in the state of Colorado. Her name was Tina Peters, and she exposed how the voting machines were being broken into and how the election was being thrown in 2020. And the Secretary of State threw her in prison for 9 years as a 70-year-old grandmother Gold Star woman. And Gold Star in the United States means that you are a mother of someone who was killed in the war. And then on top of that, 24 hours ago, it reveals that the same person who just put Tina Peters in prison for 9 years, Jenna Griswold, exposed the passwords to the Wi-Fi system for the voting machines. So this woman who claimed that Tina Peters was lying about the election fraud in 2020 and put her in prison just did the same exact thing here 24 hours ago with zero accountability. And this
I've
woman's
been
still sitting in
watching that.
prison.
Yeah, I've been
Crazy.
following the Tina Peters case, and gosh, like there's like a lady who is in prison, and all she did was tell the truth.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's scary. It's
it
terrifying.
is.
Mad. Crazy.
And so hopefully that she'll be released from prison very, very shortly. Hopefully Donald Trump will get her out of the prison.
I hope he does too. I have a feeling
Yeah.
he's going to be correcting a lot of things if he gets into office and firing a lot of people. I think my personal favorite comment that he made was by noon on the day that he's inaugurated, every single officer that was involved in the withdrawal of Afghanistan will have their resignation on his desk. And that's what we need to start effectuating change here in the U.S. military and foreign policy is fire these corrupt leaders that have been destroying our military for the past 4 years. So
Well, Adam, I'm going to be watching this video over and over and over again, as long as YouTube don't take us off, because there's something that, Paul and I are very adamant about. We want to give all sides, tell the political story of both sides of everything that's going on. And there's very few people here in Ireland talking about Donald Trump, President
mhm.
Donald J. Trump. And I think that's a shame because everybody's. And the funny thing is, last weekend, I had three people phone me and says, Roisin, you're talking about Donald Trump, in different, getting the conversation going. And I go, yeah, you know what? I never say it out loud, but if I was in America, I'd vote Donald Trump. And I never wanted Donald Trump to win an election, but now with everything that's going on, I would be a Trump supporter.
That's great to hear because, like I said, in my opinion, he's the president of peace. He's the president of prosperity, and he's the one that's going to be protecting our constitutional rights. And we need to start firing all these corrupt career politicians and changing our country. And he's a businessman, billionaire, and he doesn't need this job. He's the only guy. There's only two presidents in the history of the United States that worked for free. JFK, who was also assassinated, and then Donald Trump, who they tried to kill. Right. So that should tell you a lot. If this guy is willing to give up his $400,000 a year salary, donate it to charity, and work for president for free, and spend millions of dollars fighting it in court of all these corrupt politicians trying to keep him out of that office, then that's the person you need to elect, obviously.
Yeah, I was watching live here in Ireland. It was about 1:30 or 12:30 or something in the morning, and I was watching on RSBN the when President Donald Trump was shot in the. I was watching, like, I thought, oh my God, I can't believe what's happening.
Crazy.
And my son was out, and I went, oh my God, and he said, yeah, it was on the pub. He was out with his friends, so. It's going to be very interesting times in the next couple of weeks and couple of months, I think, all over the world, especially in America. And I think I'm of the opinion what happens in America will actually be an overflow to what happens in Europe and
I agree.
Here in Ireland.
I agree 100%.
Yeah. And there's always been a special political friendship between America and Ireland. We've always had that special relationship. Maybe not so much in the last couple of years. And I know certainly not with Obama, because Obama did nothing for Ireland and never had any intention of doing anything for Ireland. But
didn't Biden get booed when he went and gave a speech in Dublin? Like, he walked out on stage and everyone booed him. I thought that was pretty funny.
Well,
I thought that was hilarious.
Interesting, and I've asked a couple of people that Enda Kenny at the time, and it was in the papers. I'll put a link into the description box, that he actually paraphrased Barack Obama's speech at one stage, and that was all the big hype at the time. But I would love to know, will the story behind Taoiseach Enda Kenny paraphrasing Barack Obama, will that story, the backstory of that, come out in the future? No one's talking about it anymore.
Yeah, we'll see. But like I said, it's pretty easy to ride the coattails of people that have come before you to try to lie to people, because, like I said, the American attention span is that of a guinea pig. It's like 30 seconds, right? So, but I don't forget, and I know my history and I do my research. That's my job as an intelligence analyst, right? So, I'm hoping that we can effectuate change. I'm hoping that we can make these positive things. And like I said, I am more than happy to come on your show whenever you want and talk about these things. So let me know. I'm happy to come on whenever I'm free.
You come on and be our American political commentator then, and tell us what's going on and give us updates of even the presidential election and even after that of what's happening, because we love to have you with that and build up your your Irish audience, especially when you're coming over next August to historic Croke Park.
Yep. No, I'm looking forward to it. Please invite me on. And for all your listeners, you guys can follow me on Instagram. It's adam.DeRito, DERITO 2010, which is the year I graduated the Air Force Academy. Same thing on Twitter. It's Adam DeRito. And reach out to me. Happy to have those conversations. And looking forward to working with you guys in the future and keeping this relationship up. So
and we'll also put in your social media links in below, and your podcast and your YouTube channel. How is your granny? Your grandmother?
She's 100 years old. She's great. I love that lady. I don't know how much longer I have with her, but she is. That lady married my grandfather during World War II. He fought in World War II, and she's been around for every major political event in the United States since like the 40s, literally. So I'm actually really excited. I'm going home to see her for Thanksgiving, December 23rd to the 27th. I'm just trying to enjoy whatever time I have left with her, because, like I said, she's 100 years old, right? So she could live 5 minutes or 5 more years. Who knows? But
oh, she's lovely. I just thought that interview was just, and that you had with your grandmother on your YouTube channel. Oh my God, it was just beautiful.
I appreciate it. And it's good for me. It's so my family has a record of our grandmother when she does pass away, and it's something we can always look back on and have that conversation with her. So
but she'll always be in your heart.
Yep.
She definitely is. Paul,
Amazing.
any more questions for Adam?
No. Adam, thanks a million for coming on the Irish Political Roundup. It's been fascinating and it's been education for the for myself. I know I've always kind of wanted to kind of have a look at more of a look at American politics, but I wasn't sure about it or didn't know a whole lot about it. But you've really kind of opened my eyes, which is a really positive thing.
Yeah, no, for sure. And sorry if I felt like I talked too long, but I just love talking about this stuff. And like I said, I'm looking forward to coming out with you guys in the future and keeping this relationship going. So
Definitely,
Well,
definitely.
Adam,
Look
that's
forward
why
to
we
having you
got
on
you
again.
on. That's why we got you on to talk. And we used to have there was an English actress. She used to say it's good to talk.
perfect. Well, it was a pleasure, guys. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity.
Oh wow!
Right.
I'd be watching this. I don't know about you, Paul. I'm gonna be watching this over and over again and listening to all the information that Adam has given us because, it's just an awful lot of information to actually take
Yeah,
in and
exactly,
take in.
exactly. A lot of information, a lot of eye-opening information too as well. So that's, you know, as I say, every time we do a program notion, I always learn something, which is brilliant.
Yeah. Adam DeRito, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the Irish Political Roundup and talk to us and our Irish audience here on, and we really do appreciate it. And we look forward, definitely with great anticipation, until our next video.
You're welcome. Thank you again.
You're more than welcome.